What's up everybody, Dan here. So today I want to talk about expense ratios. So I guarantee you that if you're watching this video, chances are very high that you have an ETF or you have a mutual fund of some sort. So I ask you this question, do you know how much your expense ratios are on your mutual funds and ETFs? If you don't, chances are you're losing a ton of money. So in this video too, I put some chapters in so you can zoom ahead to the calculator to see how many hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're missing out on. And also too, I'm going to be giving some 401k tips, so stick around. So in this video today, I'm going to talk about why expense ratios exist, and then I'm going to talk about ways where you can find them so you can see for yourselves basically what they are and you can quickly locate them. And then I'm going to talk about what's a good expense ratio versus what's a bad expense ratio. And then we're going to look at a calculator and you can see the difference and you can see how powerful they are and why just the smallest percent can really make a difference in your portfolio. I mean, I'm talking thousands of dollars, and this is your retirement account. This is something that you're planning to hold on to for 20, 30 years. I'm hoping that today we can look at ways where maybe you can find some improvements in your portfolio, where you can find those lower expense ratios and get some better opportunities and save yourself a ton of money for the future, because any money that is taken out in expense ratios could have been future potential opportunities to be invested. So I mean, you're literally missing out on thousands and thousands of dollars. All right, so let's get into it here. So first things first, mutual funds and ETFs, exchange traded funds. So they're businesses just like anywhere else, right? So they have certain obligations, where they need to, of course, cover their expenses. They have payroll, they have administrative costs. There's expenses. Of course, there's all this marketing that has to happen. I mean, anywhere in the media you hear about these companies, they have to pay for that. So then there's, of course, record keeping fees. So there's just a lot of little fees that add up. So it's important to note that they're not just this one big company trying to take advantage of us small little investors. They're trying to make a business and living too. The one thing and key takeaway to all this is if you want to invest in stocks alone, so I'm talking just picking a ticker and investing in that stock, there is no expense ratio associated with that stock itself, because basically it's saying you own a part of that company, you own that share. Whereas a mutual fund and exchange traded fund ETF, they're made of a bunch of different stocks put together, and then they have a team that manages those stocks. So they're working really hard to kind of pick the best stocks, pick a good time to sell, pick a good time to buy. So they're doing all the legwork, they're doing all the hard work. So that's how I think of them when I'm looking at those kind of funds. So I am paying for that fee for them to manage this portfolio for me so that I can go on my day without having to think every waking moment about should I sell this stock, should I buy this stock? I'm paying for that fee. So to me, that's worth it. So basically the key takeaway to all this is to know that any expense ratio that's getting tacked on to your mutual fund or ETF is money getting taken out, and therefore is reducing the entire value of your investment. Okay, so how do you find the expense ratio, right? How do you know what to look for when you're investing in these ETF and mutual funds? Well, so there's a few ways you can find that. So the first way is the fund's prosperous. So this is just a required document that is sent out every time you invest into an ETF or mutual fund, and it tells you what the fund's plans are, what they're invested in, and it will tell you what the fees are, typically under shareholder fees. So that's one good way to find them. Another way is to just go on a website, go on like Yahoo Finance, go on Google, just search for that ticker. So find that mutual fund, find that ETF, and it'll tell you right then and there what the cost is for the expense ratio. And I'm gonna link in the description below a great website that is a good tool that I use very often, and it's called ETF.com. So in there you can do different search methods, and you can search by low expense ratios or high expense ratios, and it'll give you a great list to choose from. And from there you can make your decision. Okay, so what is considered a good expense ratio, right? So obviously the lower the better. Anything that is low is going to save you money in the long term. So anything under 0.65 is a good to decent range for your fund. So also too, when you're checking out these ETFs and mutual funds, you want to look at how they're performing, not just 1 year, not just a few years, not just a month. You want to look at how they're doing 5 to 10 years out. That's a better indication of how they are performing within the market. So 5 to 10 plus years is great. So the low range, these are going to be your Vanguards and Invescos are 0.20. And then there's different types of funds that are in the 0.21 to 0.59, and then any fund that's above 0.60 expense ratio is very expensive. It's something to really take into consideration. Also too, so take into consideration on your 401k that your companies offer. So make sure to find that ticker and to make sure to look at that prospectus to see what that rate is, because companies sometimes give you a lot of opportunities or a little opportunities to invest in. So you want to make sure that you're getting the best expense ratio. And also to take a look at the actively managed funds and take a look at what the index funds are. A lot of times the index funds are going to be a lot lower expense ratio. Also take a look at the dated funds. A lot of companies will say, hey, for me, for example, I'll be retiring in 2055, 2060. So I'll see a 2055, 2060 fund and just put 100% of my money in there. But make sure that that expense ratio is at a good range, right? Because if I'm seeing something lower, if that percentage that maybe that 5 to 10 year range of how much they're doing, how much that stock's performing is on the lower side, and they have a decently medium-sized expense ratio, I'm going to opt out of that and I'm going to invest in more of a cheaper index fund or something a little bit cheaper that may give me a better percentage. Overall, that's going to make me thousands and thousands of dollars richer than if I just stayed with the bland year rate fund. So, okay, check this out. So this is one good thing that I've read is that starting in the late 90s, the expense ratios used to be very high in the 0.9 or over 1%. And since about 2018, they've been on a downward trend and the average is becoming 0.5, 0.48, and so they're basically coming down, which is just great. You still got to keep an eye out for the expense ratio because even though they're on the downward trend, I'm going to show you now that a point percentage really matters and really adds up. So take a look. Let's check it out. So I'm here on nerdwallet.com. This is just a really great site and they have a really cool mutual fund calculator. So let's take a look. Let's see how much money we're going to be spending on these fees. And we're going to use a few scenarios here so we can see what the difference is in prices. So we're going to take a look here and see what percentage or two really means over the course of time. And of course, feel free to play with this calculator yourselves, do some different calculating and based on, of course, what your investment strategies are. But I want to just show you, just so you can get a visual of just how extreme this is. Okay, so let's do a typical $5,000 start in an investment. And let's say we're going to plan to invest $1,000 every year. And this is in our retirement, right? So we're not going to be touching this for a very long time. So let's say a 30-year horizon. And based on S&P 500 averages, so if we just picked a fund that follows the S&P 500, say for example, we're looking at about 10%. So now let's get into a super low expense ratio. Let's look at something like a Vanguard that charges a 0.07. So I'm going to calculate this. Here we go. Over the course of 30 years, that investment is going to be worth over $200,000. And at that super low expense ratio, I'm looking at paying just about $4,000 in fees, a little bit more. Okay, so let's keep the investments the same, but let's try to invest in something that's got a little bit higher expense ratio and maybe gives us a little bit better rate of return just because we're paying a little bit more. So let's bump that up to about 14%. And let's make this 0.20. So a little bit higher expense ratio. Let's do a little calculation. Okay, so as you can see here, so I bumped up the rate of return a little bit and the expense ratios, but now all of a sudden the growth of fees has gone from a few $1,000s to $29,000 just in fees alone. All right, so let's raise it even more, raise the roof. So let's get our investment rate of return up a little bit. So I'm gonna do 16%. And let's do a medium fund. So let's try something at 0.50. All right, so let's see what it gets to. So wow, so right, I'm making way more money with this this rate of return. So this is a higher rate. So this is, but it's saying that it's going to be 16% for 30 years consistently, which is very, it's very hard to predict the future, but just look at the fees. So I'm going to be paying over $100,000 in fees over that course of time. So let's bump that up even more. Say we do something like 0.75, right? And we say we keep the rate of return about the same. Now I'm paying over $150,000, $164,000 just in fees alone, just for this this fund. Now let's do the extreme, 1%. This is something that you see in mutual funds, and boom. So there you go. So over $200,000 is what you're getting charged just to hold this fund for that course of time. So that $200 could have been invested somewhere else, could have been making you more money, but instead you chose a higher expense ratio and you're literally paying for it. Okay, let's do an extreme example just because you all know that I love Tesla and you all know that I love ARK. So check this out. So if I keep the investment the same, and if I do the rate of return as about 25%, now they are at 0.75, and I'm sure they're gonna go up a little bit more. Let's check this out. So to me, that is just insane looking at these numbers. So obviously the rate of return is a lot and very nice. It's not standard, it's not typical, but check that out. If this holds true, and it's very hard to say in the future what will really happen, but say this is true, again, I would be paying $1 million in fees. I mean, to me right now today, I just can't wrap my head around that I'd be paying over $1 million to this company. It's just insane to think about. Okay, so the bottom line is, if you decide to pick a fund with a high expense ratio, then you better make sure they are performing amazing, or you're risking just losing a ton of money in the long term. So as you can see from that calculator, it just is insane how much money they are actually taking. So do yourself a favor and take a look at your funds, see what's at a good expense ratio and see what's not, and get rid of those ones that are higher. You can sell out of them. You can basically just transfer that money into a different fund without any penalty. A lot of times too, in these 401ks and IRAs, they are not charging any fees, no taxes usually whatsoever. So get out of those high funds while you can, while you've got years to invest in, and get in something lower where you can start making way more money. It is gonna be worth it. All right, everybody, so if you're still with me, thanks a lot for sticking around. So I went ahead and I found some ETFs on my own that offer a low and a medium and a high expense ratio. So I just wanted to share them with you guys just so you can get an idea of what's out there. And of course, do your own research, and I wish you guys all the best of luck, but just make sure to keep an eye on that number because it really does add up. Okay, so these are basically some of the lowest funds that I found and that have been performing the best. Obviously there's going to be some better ones out there, but these are just some that I thought were really interesting. The number one thing to note is Berkshire Hathaway is an amazing group of investments, right? So it's all owned by Warren Buffett. And so the cool thing about him is he does not charge an expense ratio whatsoever. So you can get a basically guaranteed 10 to an 11% on your money every year, year by year, and not have to pay a single fee. So of course it's more conservative, but it's nice to know, hey, sit your money in there and it's gonna grow and I don't have to pay a dime. You can't argue with that. All right, the next is here's some of the medium expense ratios that I found. So, Spider and Franklin and this Mary A. So these are all like kind of e-commerce, more modern day, some biotech. So take a look at some of these funds. So check it out. So you can see as the funds are getting more expensive that the returns are getting better. So of course there's a couple that are newer funds, but I mean, they've been performing amazing as of last year, but last year was kind of weird, just with the crash and then things coming back really hard. So probably not a really good average to do, but there's some really good ones that are medium range funds that are still doing really great. And then, of course, you all know my favorites. So these are right now the funds that offer the highest expense ratio, unfortunately. Unfortunately, they're my favorite, but check it out. So over 5 years, these things have performed in the 40s to 50%. I mean, there's no telling where things will go in the future, but I mean, I do like those returns and you can't argue with the results there. So, and then there's a few new ones, IPO, VDNI, and bots. So these are kind of looking into more artificial intelligence, more EVs, just exciting new things that are happening, and they've been performing really great. So check them out, see what you think. Of course, I'm not a financial advisor. These are just some ETFs that I found. Of course, do your own research and, just make sure you've done your due diligence before investing in anything like this. All right, so that's all I had for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. So I'm planning on doing some more videos in the future about saving tips. So keep on the lookout for what my videos are, and stay tuned for more. So thanks again, and make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. It really means a lot, and it really helps the channel out. So take care, happy investing, and good luck.